Here is a sum up of statement of co-presidency of KCK Executive Council. The Geneva II conference is supposed to play a role in forming the new Syria. However, the Kurds who prefer democratization and social development to any power and hegemony struggle are being hindered from taking part in Geneva II as an independent factor. Such an attitude reduces the hope for this conference to take positive steps towards peace and democratization in Syria. Syria is a land that harbors different ethnic and religious communities. These communities have the right of self-rule as well as establishing a free and democratic life for themselves. Syria has so many different ethnic and religious communities that it can no longer be ruled by a central state authority. The Rojava Revolution has already taken great steps towards a democratic system in which diverse ethnic and religious communities have achieved the capacity of self-rule. The Kurds are the fourth largest people in the Middle East. They have a population of 45 million in the free and democratic life shared with all other parts of Kurdistan. The Kurds demand and struggle for a free peoples in the region with the present borders left intact. They have strongly manifested this desire in and part of the democratic Syria, with its nearly 3 million Rojava. They want to be strong bases and integral population as Syria's second largest people. The Kurds have shown their resolve for a peaceful, free and democratic existence with other peoples of Syria in their 3 administrative cantons. Kurds want to take part in the Geneva II conference as an independent and democratic opposition force. With their legitimate democratic demands, their organizations and their political democratic will, the Kurds deserve participation in Geneva II. It is the most natural right of a people who have been denied and subjected to cultural genocide to take part in the Geneva II conference as a democratic force and play a role in the democratization of Syria. They lived 1 century suffering the outcomes of Lausanne. Therefore, they will not allow the Geneva II to be another Lausanne for them. The Kurds will not recognize any assembly ostracizing them and failing to reflect their rights. With such irresponsible attitudes of the organizers towards the stability and democratization of Syria, the Kurds neither recognize nor associate themselves in the decisions taken there. We call on the political powers which organize and invite opposing sides and related countries to the conference to think twice about their decision, ensure the participation of the Kurds, and take steps that will strengthen and render legitimate the Geneva II conference. If they take part as an independent delegation, the Kurds will strengthen the conference. If not, Geneva II will be an inconscient and irresolute conference whose legitimacy will not be recognized by the Kurds. At a meeting on 6th and 7th of January at the West Kurdistan Autonomous Administration Legislative Assembly, the region Rojava was divided into 3 cantons, Cizre, Kobani and Afrin. In accordance with decisions taken at that meeting, each canton is establishing its own autonomous administrative assemblies. While accepting the social agreement with the character of a constitution, the meeting decided the 3 cantons would each have their own autonomous administration. This model is based on 4 principles: canton system, legislative assembly, administration, justice and high election council. According to the decision of the Legislative Assembly, the cantons will organize elections within 4 months in order to establish democratic autonomous administrative assemblies. The Cizre canton will have an assembly with 101 deputies. The other cantons will establish the number of seats according to their needs. Each canton will have 20 ministries. All communities in the region, Kurdish, Arab, Assyrian, Chechen and Armenian, will be represented in the Legislative Assembly. This assembly, part of a decentralized system, is seen as a model for a future democratic Syria. 7 years ago today, Armenian journalist Hrant Dink was killed in full daylight while coming out of the offices of the weekly he directed, Agos. Kurdistan Communities Union KCK Executive Council member Mustafa Karasu commented on the murder of Armenian journalist Hrant Dink in an interview with Stark TV. Karasu evaluated Dink's murder as a state policy and underlined that similar massacres will continue to take place unless Turkey achieves democratization and a solution to the Kurdish question. KCK executive remarked that the Turkish state wanted to make Turkey a nation state of only Turks by killing off all Christians, Armenians, Greeks and Jews in the country, adding that the murders Turkey is conspiratorially committing are a consequence of the state policy, but not its hostility against these communities. According to Karasu, the fact that these murders are a part of the state policy makes it impossible to shed light on these executions which, he said, are committed by the government organizations or intelligence services that do what the state cannot do officially. Light can be shed on these murders not in present-day conditions, but only when Turkey achieves democratization and a solution to the Kurdish question. This is because Turkey is still maintaining the one nation, one state and one homeland mentality and is yet to resolve the Kurdish issue, Karasu remarked. Karasu noted that this truth was also the reason for why no light has been shed yet on the assassination of Sakine Cansız, Fidan Doğan and Leyla Şalemez in Paris on 9th of January 2013. They have always resorted to such actions against Kurds in order to massacre them, to break their political will and to suppress their demands for freedom and democracy. The murder of Sara Comrade is not any different from what was done in order for the elimination of the Kurdish freedom movement in the 90s, when thousands of people fell victim to unsolved murders and villages were burnt down, Karasu added. Pointing out that intelligence organizations were also involved in the murder of Armenian journalist Hrant Dink, KCK executive continued, "The person in contact with the perpetrators is a member of the BBP, Grand Unity Party, which makes one conclude that the BBP is in touch with intelligence organizations or that the party is the voluntary striking power of the state."
Yaşasın Büyük Birlik Partisi! Yaşasın Alperen Ocakları!
Karasu emphasized that Kurds and the Kurdish freedom movement are the greatest ally for Armenians, Jews, Greeks, Syriacs and all other different ethnic and religious communities for the attainment of a truly free and democratic life. Reminding that Kurds and Armenians lived together for thousands of years in history, Karasu pointed out that the massacre of Armenians caused pain for Kurds as well and added that we do not have a conception of one nation in one homeland. Kurdistan is the home of everyone who have ever lived on these lands. As editor-in-chief of the bilingual Turkish-Armenian newspaper Agos, Hrant Dink was a prominent member of the Armenian minority in Turkey. Dink was best known for advocating Turkish-Armenian reconciliation and human and minority rights in Turkey. He was often critical of both Turkey's denial of the Armenian genocide and of the Armenian diaspora's campaign for its international recognition. Hrant Dink was born in Malatya on September 15, 1954, the eldest of three sons to Sarkish Dink, a tailor from Gürün, Sivas, and Gülvart Dink from Kangal, Sivas. His father's gambling debts led to the family's move to Istanbul in 1960, where they sought a new beginning. Dink's grandfather enrolled the boys at the Gedikpaşa Armenian orphanage. Dink often noted his grandfather, who spoke 7 languages and read constantly, as the role model and father figure who inspired his love of letters. The Gedikpaşa Armenian Orphanage, an institution run by the Armenian evangelical community, was to be home to Hrant Dink for the next 10 years. During his senior year, he was expelled from the Üsküdar Surp Haç and completed his high school degree at the Şişli Public High School. Hrant Dink continued his education at Istanbul University, where he studied zoology and became a sympathizer of TİKO, the armed faction of the Maoist TKP-ML. Hrant Dink parted ways with his friends and remained at the sympathizer level, completing his bachelor's degree in zoology and enrolling in the philosophy department for a second bachelor's degree, which he did not complete. Hrant Dink was one of the founders of Agos Weekly, the only newspaper in Turkey published in Armenian and Turkish, and served as the editor-in-chief of Agos from its founding in 1996 until his death in 2007. Dink was prosecuted 3 times for denigrating Turkishness while receiving numerous death threats from Turkish nationalists. Hrant Dink was assassinated in Istanbul in January 2007 by Ogün Samast, a 17-year-old Turkish nationalist. This was shortly after the premiere of the genocide documentary Screamers, in which he is interviewed about Turkish denial of the Armenian genocide of 1915 and the case against him.
Այսօր կան թուրքեր, որ չեն ընդունիր, որ իրենց բաբերը այսպես են ցեղասպանություն ըրած են։ Բայց եթե նայես բարի մարդիկ են, արդյոք ինչու չեն ընդունիր։ Այդ հարցումը կարևոր է, ինչու չեն ընդունիր, որովհետև իրենք ցեղասպանության թեմ գեցող անձեր են, եւ գիտեն, որ ցեղասպանությունը քեշ բան մնե, եւ իրենք չեն երբեք ուներ, եւ իրենց բաբերն ալ պետք չէ ըրած ըլլան, այսպես ասենք մոդեցում մգրնան։
While Samas has since been taken into custody, photographs of the assassin flanked by smiling Turkish police and gendarmerie, posing with the killer side by side in front of the Turkish flag, have since surfaced. The photos created a scandal in Turkey, prompting a spate of investigations and a removal from office of those involved. At his funeral, 200,000 mourners marched in protest of the assassination, chanting, "We are all Armenians and we are all Hrant Dink." Today, Dink trial re-investigate and Friends of Hrant still chants on streets for justice. We are here, comrade. Lawyers from BDP Justice and Human Rights Commission and the family lawyers of Sakine Cansız, Fidan Doğan and Leyla Şailemez, the three Kurdish women assassinated in Paris last year, presented a petition to Ankara Directory of Public Prosecutors, which carries the investigation of the assassinations, to overturn the confidentiality decision on the file and to ask to MIT if the chief suspect Ömer Güney worked under their rule. Lawyers mentioned in their petition that the confidentiality decision on the file continues the injury of the aggrieved families and raises concerns in the public if the file is sidestepped. Hussein Ali, a celebrated Kurdish writer, said Paris assassination was organized together by AKP and the Gülen organization. AKP and the organization of Gülen have in collaboration pursued war policies against Kurdish people. It is on the basis of these policies that the military and large segments bureaucracy gave support to AKP government. It is through these policies that the government could take the votes of those who have a nationalist mentality. It is this common political will that is behind the dirty practices that turned overall Kurdistan into a torture and gas chamber, the brutal attacks on and killing of Kurdish people. It is AKP government, especially its Prime Minister Erdogan, who ordered all political massacres. The violent war in 2011 and 2012 and the attacks in order to exterminate, just like the Sri Lankan case, the Kurdish liberation movement were put into operation by AKP, hands in hands with the organization of Gülen. Definitely, it is the government that has to bring clarification to Paris assassination. Without the solution of these kinds of murders and without condemning the mentality and the policies behind these murders, the solution of the Kurdish problem is not possible. Local election in Turkey will be held on 30th of March 2014. Peace and Democracy Party BDP is preparing itself for local elections and is the only party in Turkey which has high number of women candidates. According to the report which was published by the Women Coalition, the women record political parties running for the local elections, the highest record in terms of number of women candidates and participation of women is the BDP. Considering the party's candidates by 15th of January, the Women Coalition underlined that the ruling AK Party has only one woman candidate out of 81 mayor candidates. This means a 1.2% of the candidates. Not all candidates have yet been presented though. The opposition party, CHP, has 31 women candidates out of 745 mayor candidates. The opposition nationalist party, the MHP, has 12 women candidates out of 1,064 mayor candidates. The BDP has presented 32 women candidates out of 182 mayor candidates. While the date of the local election in Turkey gets closer, the political party announcing their candidates. The People's Democracy Party has announced its list of candidates for the local elections scheduled for 30th of March under the slogan, "The city is yours." HDP co-chair Sabahat Tunca spoke at the meeting and said, "We will promote freedom for women and unity and togetherness." After Tunca's speech, the candidates were introduced. The HDP's Istanbul candidates are Sırrı Süreyya Önder and Pınar Aydınlar.